Okay, we are in the 18th book of Yisrayl, Tested and Proven. Almost on chapter 18. One more class and we'll be 18. This is chapter 17 for this class here. The pattern of the house and kingdom of Yahweh is shown from Genesis to Revelations. You need to know. I'll read that again. Chapter 17, the pattern of the house and kingdom of Yahweh is shown from Genesis to Revelations. You need to know. And that's from Noah 3, dated 5/1918. And we start off here on page 171. The pastor gives the intros here, and in verse 3 he says, "Teachers wanted. That's our job." If you listen closely to this sermon and tie it in with everything that's been brought to you already this morning by Yahweh's priests, you're going to be very delighted. We're reaching the world. I don't have time to read that today, but possibly Pentecost. We're reaching it big time. Every nation on earth is able to get it. And what Yahweh has opened for his house in these last days, and our ability to reach the nations has been absolutely phenomenal. You think about back in the early 90s, pretty much all we had were a few radio stations, AM radio stations. If you're in an area where you could have a public access, which that is still going strong, and you had cable TV or television that you could pick up that reception, you can watch it there. And of course, the mail-outs that went out and the reach-out that people actually went from door to door in places in their that they lived to hand those things out, it was kind of limited. Not as limited as it was with the apostles in the days of the apostles and the prophets, but it was not like it is today where we have all this technology. Verse 6, it says, "The house of Yahweh is where you learn the difference in the worship of the religions today. We worship Yahweh, we serve Yahweh, the Creator. The Creator's name is Yahweh." Now, I was thinking about that when I was reading this verse here, where Pastor says, the house of Yahweh is where you learn the difference in the worship of Yahweh, or in the worship of the religion. So we see the difference in the worship of the religions, and of course the worship of Yahweh. And that made me think about this part in the Peaceful Solution here in the Building Moral Excellence on page 6, and it talks about the importance of morals to character, okay? Because in these things that we see, in seeing the difference between the worship of the religions and the worship of Yahweh, of course, it's a character that's being built. It says, one of the key factors that separates and distinguishes character from personality is called moral principles. In general, moral or ethical principles are universal. And skip down a little bit there. It says, moral principles clearly separate what is right from wrong, and they are the foundation of character, okay? And that's what the laws do. The principles are the laws, the rules that separate right from wrong. All right, here, let's see here. It says, pastor's talking about the name of Yahweh, and he said you can ask anybody in Israel, and they all know those characters, Yod He Wah He, says Yahweh. So it's not a secret. They just refuse to serve him, to say his name, and to keep his laws. Well, in verse 7 here, pastor says home. Now the service is here at the house of Yahweh. The word home has a very special meaning. I'm surprised I don't hear more sermons about that word home there, because the word home actually ties into the word bayit, which also means house. Let me see here. I looked up something. See if I can pull it up here. Just something quick, because time doesn't allow us to go through everything here. But just to get your mind to thinking, this was on the word bayit, and they talk about this statement that's mentioned. There's no place like home. And they're talking about, this is a Hebrew website talking about this word home. And he says here, we come to the word bayit. This is usually translated as house or home, as it is in the Hebrew, bayit Yahweh, or house of Yahweh. or the home of Yahweh. That word also means family of Yahweh. The root meaning is receptacle or a defined space, And the house of Yahweh, of course, is a defined space that people go to. Yahweh tells us in Deuteronomy 12:5 to seek the place I have chosen, the place I've chosen to put my name, and there you must go. Let's see, let me get to the main part here. Okay, the use of the word is even broader than this. The word country can be referred to as Beit. For instance, the state of Israel, which is known as House of Peace. Hebrew is a little bit rusty here. It's written in Hebrew. Which is the national home of what they call the Jewish people or the Hebrew people. Finally, the word Beit does not even need to refer to a concrete space. It is sometimes used to describe an abstract concept. So people as well. It can refer to people, a family, let's see here, or a space, a place. He says here, but as the way the word Beit is used in Hebrew language shows that it's not entirely basically limited to a house, the huge range of meanings of the word shows that lots of places can be home. Indeed, almost anywhere can be a home. A home isn't about a space, it's about a state of mind. And where does Yahweh dwell? That's right, in his people. All right, let's look over to page 172. Pastor says Yahweh tells us where it will be, what it will be called, who will establish it, and when it would be. Okay, verse 9. You can see we're closely tied to Yeshua and Yahweh. We're in unity with Yahweh, as he shows in the Gematria that was brought out so plainly this morning. I started to send a note to Greg Kahan this morning to tell him to slow down a little, but we're going to have this in book form. We're going to have it in disc where you can get it. And Pastor says we're in unity. And that's what we need to be. That's what we need to focus on. Being in unity with Yahweh, being in unity with Yeshua, being in unity with the laws of Yahweh. In Psalms, let's look here, Psalms. If you have your book Yahweh, you can write for your notes. Psalms 133. Psalms 133 in verse 1. And some of you might remember this from the old days when we used to sing these psalms here in the house of Yahweh. And this is a song of ascents of David. How pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. And in Psalms 133 verse 1 it says, behold how right, and if you look at the side note there it says righteous, and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity, to be one with Yahweh, a unit. Now we got, pretty soon here we have the Day of Atonement coming up, and that's a time where we focus on being in unity or at one with Yahweh, with Yahweh's laws, with one another, and so forth. So, this unity or this unit, or as it's also called, a body, as Yeshua talked about, a body you have prepared for me. This is the focus and the goal that Yahweh has in this time period, being a body, being one. There's so much division in the world. There's so much division in the universe, and that's of course what Satan is. She's the great divider. She's the one who causes separation and splits among families, among nations, among kingdoms, among brothers. And of course she doesn't want this unity that Yahweh says that we're going to have in this house and in this body that is called with the name of Yahweh. But it says here, to be one with Yahweh, a unit, alike, with the same mind and thoughts, all in one accord. And of course he talks about the anointing of Aaron and how that took place and how it's like precious oil upon his head. Look at 1 Corinthians here. Look at verse chapter 1, or you can write for your notes. In verse 10, it says there, now I appeal to you, brothers, by the authority of our King Yeshua Messiah, that you all speak the same thing, and that there be no division among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. Be perfectly united in mind and thought. Because if you think about what Yahweh wants us to do in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, right? And you think about what the prophet says, that the laws of Yahweh, Yahweh will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and our hearts and our minds will be directed towards Yahweh through his priest, through his house. We have to change our minds. We have to change the way we think. And the only way that can occur is through teaching. And of course, a person can teach till they're blue in the face, but the individual who's receiving that teaching has to accept it and start to put it to work in their life so it can produce the effect that Yahweh says that his laws will produce. Now the sons of Yahweh, they had these teachings, they had these laws, they have the laws, but they don't accept it. They don't hold fast to it. Remember, they had these things to begin with, and they rejected Yahweh. And Yahweh said that, well, it doesn't work this way, and of course it's not a surprise to Yahweh. And of course he already had in his plan to build this family, this home, this kingdom of priests who will rule as Yahweh, as Exodus chapter 19 verse 5 and 6 says. And this is what he's doing with mankind. And if one day the Malachim are actually going to be under subjection to the sons of men, but we've got to get our acts together first. We've got to show Yahweh, we have to show the heavens that we can handle this great responsibility that Yahweh is already boasting to all the heavens, that mankind is going to do it. They're going to become just like me. And of course there's scoffing that's taking place, there's laughter, there's jokes, there's, oh, mankind, yeah, look at these guys, they can't even live past 60, 70 years. People are dying in their 30s, they're shooting each other up. How in the world are they going to be over us? How are they going to teach us? How are they going to, we're doing the same things, And so this whole thing is set as a scenario, a picture before all heaven and earth, a reality show, if you would, that Yahweh is pulling one out of a city, two out of a country, and so forth, and bringing to his house, training in his laws, and giving us the environment to grow in, and the space to repent and overcome. When you think about your mind, one thing I read, and it was pretty interesting the way they worded it about your mind, is like soil. Okay, think of your mind as nourishing, fertile soil. Okay, and nourishing, fertile soil will pretty much grow anything you plant into it. If you plant a weed in soil, you're going to grow a weed. If you plant a flower in soil, a healthy soil, you're going to grow a flower. So those seeds that are planted in our minds are the same as thoughts. Think of them as thoughts or teachings or influences or things we hold fast to. And this is why Yahweh says we have to study and meditate on the book of the law, search out the book of Yahweh and read, because those things are the seeds that are planted in our minds. And if we'll nourish them and build them and practice them, and not just, you can't just think 24 hours a day and become righteous. No, you have to put it to work in your everyday life. In every situation, you have to put the laws of Yahweh and those thoughts in your mind about keeping the laws of Yahweh to work. And of course, this is also what brings us into unity with Yeshua and Yahweh. Pastor says we're in unity with Yahweh as he shows in the Gematria. Look at verse 10. He says, write this down. I hope all the newcomers have a pencil and paper where you can write this down. If you go to Genesis 3, even if you have a King James Version, and study this closely, Genesis 3, 1 through 5, you'll see Satan and her gods. She wants you to worship the gods. She doesn't want you to worship, she doesn't want you to serve Yahweh. That is plainly shown there in Genesis 3, 1 through 5. Also, verse 5 shows you the gods are evil. They're not righteous like Yahweh. They're not bringing forth the righteousness that Yahweh said to seek. Now, I grew up in Christianity before Yahweh brought me to His house, and I don't ever remember any of the preachers telling us to seek the house. I don't ever remember any of them saying that, because if they were to, then like what we see here in Matthew 6:33, they would have to follow it up with what Yeshua said, and the righteousness. The righteousness. Now, you can't just seek a house and then just go there and stand around. Yeshua gives us all the things. He followed up what Yahweh said in His. All Yeshua was doing was quoting the law of Yahweh. He didn't add anything to it. But He said, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh. In Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and His righteousness. Seek Yahweh's kingdom and His righteousness. This is the only way that we could actually qualify to be in Yahweh's kingdom, is not just by seeking, but seeking in order to understand, to learn what it's about, to develop the character of Yahweh, to obey these things that Yahweh is showing through His 613 laws, to be like Yahweh. Okay? And I know that for us it's a little easier with our time in the house of Yahweh, but when you look at the world being like Yahweh, if you just say just being like the Creator, that's a hard thing for people to fathom. That's a hard thing for people to imagine. Be like the Creator? Oh, no, I can never do that. It's impossible to be perfect. Nobody can be perfect. But that's exactly what Yahweh tells us to do. He says, be perfect as I am perfect. Be holy as I am holy. But the standard of perfection that Yahweh gives is not according to man's standard. That standard is according to righteousness. So, based on man's standards, no. Yeah, it is impossible to be perfect. But according to Yahweh's standard, it is. Yahweh doesn't put upon us any more than we can bear. So that's what we see in the world today. That's why we see the world news. They're getting ready for nuclear war. In verse 11, Pastor says, in Deuteronomy 30:15-18, Yahweh said, I set the God worship in front of you, and I set righteousness in front of you. That's Deuteronomy 30:15-18. Please write it down and study it for yourself. I'm not pulling your leg. I'm not lying to you. Everything I teach comes straight from the Holy Scriptures. And if you just take into consideration that word set. Now, if you were to go and look up the word set in the dictionary, there's 100-something meanings for the word set and how it can be applied. But one thing that caught my eye, because I remember Pastor saying a long time ago, he said, a person can go and look up words in the Hebrew, and that word could have 100 definitions, but you have to take into consideration how it applies to the prophecy. You have to take into consideration how it applies to what that prophet or the apostle or the Yeshua, whoever was speaking, was referring to at that time. And there's a lot that goes into the Hebrew language, and I'm not even an English scholar by any means, but there's a lot that goes into understanding the Hebrew. Some men dedicate their whole life to understanding the Hebrew language. But one interesting point in this word "set" is the synonym for it, which means is decide or decided. Okay, Yahweh decided already in advance that He would allow this God worship to be in front of us, and He would allow righteousness to be placed in front of us, and then He simply says, you make the choice. You have to make the choice. The kingdom of heaven already decided that this is necessary for you to be in this environment in order for you to be made in my image and likeness. Can't do it like the gods. Can't do it like the first sons. We have to actually become like Yahweh. We have to grow into it. I was trying to think of the word that was in the prophetic word recently. Maybe it'll come to me. What Pastor was referring to his sons, though. Well, in verse 12, he says, Deuteronomy 30:15-18, Yahweh says, if you turn to these gods, you will perish. Yahweh brought them out of the land of Egypt. The land of Egypt is where it all began, and this God worship is spread throughout the whole world. The Coptic Catholics. Coptic means Egyptian. Catholic means universal. If you notice the news today, they're calling this the Universal Agreement, the peace agreement that they're going to put back into operation. Universal, they're talking about God worship. Now, this agreement that they're working to put back, the deal of the century, it's not going to bring peace. It's not going to bring peace between nations, peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Why? Why will it not bring peace? Because it lacks one vital element, the laws of Yahweh. You know, Donald Trump or Jared Kushner or anybody else who worked in bringing this about throughout the years from before 1993, that's when they actually signed the document, and then it went into effect a month later. But they were working on it, the plan, long before that it was actually put down on paper for a signature to be placed. But the intention was never to bring peace Yahweh's way. It was never consulting to see, what laws can we put into practice that will stop the war, that will stop the fighting, that will stop the killing. So here it says here, let me move forward here. Pastor talks a little bit about the mark of the beast and how he was just showing here that what the news was showing in verse 14, every prophecy has come to pass except for the ones about the last 3.5 years. The peace treaty that was signed in 1993, we wrote about it in the mark of the beast long before that, back in the 1970s. It was 1976, I do believe. I showed you that peace agreement before it was ever signed with Rabin. And even the world acknowledges this. The world acknowledges that all the criticism of the House of Yahweh, they acknowledge that prophecy that was shown. Now, Pastor, he didn't make the prophecy. The prophecy was our Daniel. Daniel talked about the prophecy, but Pastor, he wrote about it in the Mark of the Beast in 1976. They acknowledge that. Yeah, he had that right. He got that right there. But they deny everything else. Yeah, praise Yahweh. He says, I showed you that peace agreement before it was ever signed with Rabin. These prophecies are sure. It's the biggest thing that makes Yahweh stand out amongst the gods. They can't foretell the future. The gods also can't bring forth salvation. They can't save mankind from their sins. They're the cause of man's sins. They can bring forth a false impression of salvation. They can have some statue crying blood or some cow dung shaped in the shape of Jesus or something like that. And, having people thinking that this is a sign from the Lord. But it doesn't bring forth salvation. None of those things have ever converted a person to keeping Yahweh's laws. Ever. But teaching and guiding a person in Yahweh's way does. In Matthew 24, it shows that the God worshippers are going to bring forth the bomb that started, of course, in 1934. And I was born in 1934, he says. Knowledge would be increased. The start of knowledge being increased was 1934. How many of us grew up in the time period of horse and buggy? Nobody? Nobody had to ride a horse and buggy to school? No? Anybody remember those horse traffic jams, on the interstate? None of us grew up in that time period. I mean, there might be some who actually did and could remember that, but I don't remember that. The only time I saw horse and buggies was when I was in the Amish territory, in the back roads in the country of Ohio. But I don't remember that. We grew up in this time period of knowledge increase. And so we have all of these things to spoil us, so to speak, and have not experienced the hardships of the people. It wasn't really a hardship. That's what they were used to. I don't think Abraham or the children of Israel, when they were leaving Egypt, thought to themselves, man, it sure would be nice to have a greyhound. It sure would be a lot faster. They didn't have that. They didn't have anything like that when they were leaving Egypt. Everything they did for almost 6,000 years is the way mankind did things. It was just in this last time period, and Yahweh prophesied, he showed it through Daniel, that this technology was going to increase in the last generation, which of course started in 1934 when the witness was born. And all the other things that tie into it, of course, backing up the prophecies of Yahweh and should increase our faith and our trust in Yahweh, in his prophecies for mankind, and then of course bringing us to this perfection that he says he wants to bring us to in Genesis chapter 1:26, and showing in Revelations 22 that who will enter the kingdom. Well, here in let me see here, let's finish up here. He says here in verse 22, when these books were written, there were no bombs. Knowledge to mankind then was driving a covered wagon, as we see in the peaceful scene down there. All farming was done with horses at that time. Now it was done with machinery after the knowledge had been increased. Knowledge didn't even start to increase until 1934. We traded the horses for tractors, airplanes that can fly, and missiles that can go to another nation and pinpoint cities and make rubbish out of them. That's what's been brought forth since 1934 only. And of course, this is what mankind has done with the great technology that Yahweh allowed to be brought forth, and he held it back. You think of the power that Yahweh held back for almost 6,000 years, 5,900 something years. Yahweh held that technology back, that knowledge increasing, and then he allowed it to just a little bit be given to mankind, and we see what mankind has done to it. Now, what they're building is a home for the gods. They're building a kingdom. They're building up the kingdom of the gods. But Yahweh has called us here to build up the kingdom of Yahweh, the family of Yahweh. And of course, when we reach this perfection that Pastor's pointing us in the direction of here, and Yeshua encouraged us to seek, then we will be that kingdom of Yahweh, that kingdom of priests that Yahweh prophesies that there will be no end to that government, referring to Yeshua, and it will last forever. So if you all please stand, turn it over to the great Kohan, Levi Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. So we are continuing in the 18th book of Israel, 18th book, chapter 17. And I'd like to start on verse 24 and then probably skip over a little bit down to verse 34. But in continuing in what the great Kohan was covering, Pastor's talk is getting into where he's going to go through Revelation chapter 6, talking about the quartet. And it's really interesting what he says here in this verse 24. He says, he shows you the quartet first, and then he says, Revelation 6:1, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were one of the four living ones. These are the quartet. If you look back over to Revelation 4:6, they are called four living creatures. Now, what I found really interesting is how he described it. He said, there are four active organizations: governmental, ecclesiastical, which is pertaining to the church, academic organizations. So you have to also remember that academic, which involves the colleges, the schools, the universities, all of that to be part of the academic aspect of it. Academic organizations put together by a supermind much higher than mankind, who's using her power to bring forth evil to try to destroy Yahweh's creation of mankind. That's her whole purpose. So this is the whole intent of these organizations, or the quartet that is spoken of here in Revelation chapter 6, verse 1. She doesn't want you to make it into the kingdom and receive the authority that you're going to receive. That is actually shown here. So that's Satan's entire purpose. She doesn't want anyone to receive the authority that Yahweh promises. She wants to get rid of all of mankind. She knows for a fact that she cannot come against the house of Yahweh in the last days because Yahweh simply will not allow it. So her overall goal is to get rid of all of mankind, everything, and that's why you have the nuclear bombs and the nuclear weapons. Now let's go to verse 34, because here Pastor is going through Revelation chapter 6, and he's looking at the different seals, and he's explaining it in a step-by-step manner, which I don't have time to really go through it, but it's great to read it because he's just taking us through each verse and describing what is taking place. Now in verse 8, and I looked and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat upon it was Death, and Sheol, the grave, followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth part of the earth. Notice how it's limited. It's not here in America at this time. This country has a lot of deaths, yes, from sickness, disease, earthquakes, and so forth. But the wars are held in that portion of the earth, the fourth part of the earth, to show you who are listening to me out there that this prophecy is 100% reliable. And if you look at all the trouble that is taking place, or the wars that are taking place in particular, where they're located, well, in that fourth part of the earth, in and around the river Euphrates. And then Pastor goes further, he says, over a fourth part of the earth. Why is it not occurring here? Talking about the wars. Why is the wars not taking place here? Because the United States, prophecy shows, has the House of Yahweh. And this is really important because sometimes, we wonder, well, why certain things are being held back from the United States. Well, this is where the House of Yahweh has been established. This is where the work of Yahweh is going forth to all nations. So there has to be a certain level of security where the House of Yahweh is at in order to allow the work to go forth to all the earth. And Yahweh has given us a little space. He has carved out a little bit of land for ourselves here at the House of Yahweh to where we can worship Yahweh. We can get the work of Yahweh done. But that's the purpose that everything is taking place, in the sense of why we don't see the wars and the fighting or armies trying to encroach upon the U.S. soils, because the House of Yahweh is here. But in that fourth part of the earth, as the prophecy shows, this is where you're seeing the death and the fighting and everything that is taking place in that area. And then, of course, we know that war is actually going to turn into a nuclear war in that fourth part of the earth first, and then it will spread to all the earth later on. And Pastor goes on describing this here in the verses that follow. Then he talks about, in Revelation 9, showing where the four messengers are loose, which is in and around the great river Euphrates. Let's look at verse 40. He says, back to Revelation 6:8, and I look and behold a pale horse, and the name of him who sat upon it was Death, and Sheol the grave followed with him, and power was given to them over a fourth part of the earth to kill with sword and with hunger and with pestilence. And then you could see that, when you look at the activities of the nations in that fourth part of the earth, people are being killed indiscriminately. People are being bombed in Iraq, they're being bombed in Syria, they're being bombed in Lebanon, they're being bombed in Libya, in Gaza, in different areas in Afghanistan. There's an indiscriminate killing that is going on in that fourth part of the earth. Any nation could decide, well, you know what, I'm going to just send my planes over and bomb whomever I want to bomb with impunity, without any kind of repercussions, without any type of retaliation. Most of the times, there's just a free-for-all that is taking place in that fourth part of the earth that if you wasn't aware of it, you would think, well, how did we get to this point here to where you just have so many nations, the United States, Russia, European nations, Arab nations, all involved in warfare in that fourth part of the earth. And this is what we see taking place at this time, and it's even going to get greater than what we are currently experiencing. But notice in verse 41, the same under the authority of the beast of the earth. Beast of the earth, Daniel described them perfectly. The four beasts that came up were slowly trained, brought together to become what was called the Great Holy Roman Empire, led by the Catholic Church. No, they are not separate. So these four beasts that you read in Daniel, they're not separate. Daniel said in chapter 11, verse 31, I believe that the armies stand on the part of the Roman Catholic Church who changed the laws of Yahweh. And then he goes into the Roman Catholic Church admitting that they changed the laws of Yahweh. But if you consider the reason why you have these four systems that was brought together under the inspiration of Satan, it's for one reason. It is to destroy mankind. So you have to have opposition. You have to have, as Revelation chapter 18 verse says, Revelation chapter 18, it says that the nations are angry. So you have to have the anger, the continual prodding at each other, the tariffs and the retaliation and so forth, because the influence that is over mankind at this time, the goal is to destroy mankind. That's the goal. The goal is to destroy mankind. And when you understand that, then it makes a lot more sense what you see taking place in the earth at this time. It makes a lot more sense why they're getting out of certain treaties that involve nuclear weapons. It makes a lot more sense why they're pushing forth the development of short-range nuclear weapons and so forth, why they're upgrading their nuclear weapons, why other nations are trying to acquire nuclear weapons, because that's the direction that Satan wants the nations to go in, is to destroy the entire earth. And the bombs that mankind has created or has developed since 1934, it will accomplish that purpose. It will definitely burn the earth. Let's go to verse 43. And he's talking about, again, the Catholic Church, the Pope, talking about saying that the laws are done away with, that the Bible and some of the things that are stated in it is a myth. He says, what do they follow? What do they have to get their teeth in? Nothing. They have absolutely nothing but lies from Satan, who is deceiving them and offering them much reward to bring forth and dominate. She said, you can dominate these, go out conquering and to conquer. Rule them and you can have all their wealth and all of them as slaves. That is the power that brings forth the wars today. And this is what you see the nations fighting over. Anywhere there's a little bit of oil that is under some ocean or under the ice or in some far-off region where nobody has claim, well, the nations are trying to claim it for themselves. They're trying to claim that wealth, or they want to buy certain islands or certain things like that because they want to claim the wealth and the resources. But the thoughts or the energy or the inspiration is coming forth from Satan. That's the source of it, because the whole purpose of it is to bring forth what Yahweh points out in these prophecies. So in verse 8, to kill with the sword and with hunger, that is starvation. And of course we see that creeping in so many different ways that it's you really have to be paying attention to the news, but there is starvation that is coming. With pestilence, the same under the authority of the beasts of the earth, that is with the diseases. Verse 12, and I looked, and behold, when he had opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And I don't know how many of you have seen the news about parts of the Amazon that is burning, the fires that is burning in the Amazon rainforest. And they showed one of the Brazilian cities that it was evening time, but it looked like nighttime. I think it was either 3 or 4 o'clock in the evening, but the smoke from the fires, from the forest fires that was burning at that time, completely blocked out the sun. And that's just a forest fire. It's a huge fire, but just think about when you have all of the cities of the earth burning, or the ones that will be destroyed, that they have their nuclear bombs that targeted and so forth. Not every single city is going to burn on the earth, but many of the major cities are going to burn. And just think about the smoke and the debris that's going to go into the atmosphere, into the firmament, and how that is going to circle around the earth and spread out and diffuse itself and etc. Well, you can literally see, and we will see this prophecy being fulfilled when it talks about the sun becoming black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon becoming as blood. And then he says we are seeing a lot of those earthquakes now. And there has been thousands of earthquakes that has taken place for the year already. I was looking it up, and I didn't really get time to get into it, but there's thousands upon thousands of earthquakes that has taken place. And those are earthquakes that are above magnitude 4.0 and above. So you're looking at thousands. I think for the year so far there have been over 7,000, I think it's 4.0 to 4.5 magnitude earthquakes that has already taken place. And there are earthquakes that takes place practically every hour, I would say. of lower magnitudes, 3 point something, 2 point something. I mean, there are earthquakes taking place all the time. But there has been major earthquakes taking place at this time also. Let's look at verse 46. He says, turn to Revelation chapter 13, and then he starts describing another beast that is shown here. Verse 47, I stood upon the sands of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, out of multitudes, nations, and tongues, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Then he says, Revelation, well, let's continue reading this. Daniel described this beast with 10 horns. There were 4 of them. They were all brought together to create one power. Here he shows you the location. Remember, Daniel was written in 500 to 600 BY. Revelation was written in 96 AY. So what you see Pastor is doing, he's comparing the prophecies that are shown in Daniel to what is shown in Revelation. And you see the same description that was given to Daniel also being given to Yachanan in Revelation. But what Yachanan wrote in the book of Revelation in 96 AY is for us in this generation. So that's, this is the time period now that you can see everything that Yachanan described and some of what Daniel described taking place in this time period. He says that was 20-something years after they destroyed Jerusalem and moved the temple to Rome, where the Pope now sits, called the Sistine Chapel. He said, I've been there. We have seen it. Yes, it's the temple. They moved it from Jerusalem to Rome. That was in 70 AY. And of course, we know that it sits there today. That's where anytime they're going to elect a new pope, that's where all the cardinals convene together in the Sistine Chapel to cast their ballot on whom they're going to select to be pope and etc. So he says that the book of Revelation, it was placed with the rest of the book of Yahweh, and Yahweh brought it to us 1,500 years later, so his house only would bring this out to the world. It was prophesied that we would bring it to the whole world, and that's what we are doing. So we are doing what has been spoken of us, what has been prophesied of us to do, and we are bringing forth those prophecies. So again, he goes back into the description of what is shown in Revelation chapter 13. So it has 10 horns, upon his horns 10 crowns, upon his heads the names of blasphemy. That's blaspheming Yahweh, which he does, speaking of the Vatican and the Pope, never misses a chance at doing so. And the beast which I saw was similar to a leopard. His feet was the feet of a bear, his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power. Notice who gave this beast his authority. It doesn't come from Yahweh. Notice it comes from the dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. So that's describing the beastly system. The beastly system, it gets its authority coming forth from Satan. Now let's look at Revelation chapter 12, verse 3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. It says, you are verse 1 here in chapter 12. You are the house of Yahweh, the home of Yahweh's people. So what Pastor is doing now is contrasting what we just saw in Revelation chapter 13, what we just read in Revelation chapter 6, and now he's talking about us, the house of Yahweh. So again, if you remember, the title of the sermon is The Pattern of the House and Kingdom of Yahweh, shown from Genesis to Revelation, you need to know. So looking at verse 53, Revelation 12:3, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 horns upon the heads. So you can see here, this is the same beast. Same beast that is spoken of in Revelation 13, also in Daniel, it's the same beast being described. But then he says, look back to verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. He says, get this. This is beautiful. Now, man, I need everyone to really start, putting on, utilizing your imagination here, because it's a wonderful picture that is being painted for us. And if you could begin to grasp it in your mind's eye, it will really do well for you. What Pastor is trying to get across to us. He says, get this. This is beautiful. This is the house of Yahweh clothed with the sun. And he says, you think of the glory that Yahweh intends to give to his house. Start comparing that with what is being put together from the beginning that this was prophesied. He says, look at it. Verse 1, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. This is all going back, as I've brought out in the books before this, it's going back to the house of Yahweh being established from the 12 tribes. You only have I known of all the families of the earth. These 12 tribes were brought up to this time period right now. Yahweh is showing your glory of this house of Yahweh prophesied from the beginning. We are the finishing of this home of Yahweh's people in this time period, in this generation. Now, it's really hard it's hard for me to really comprehend the glory that Yahweh is showing that we would have once his plan is completed. It's really hard to comprehend, because there's really nothing on the face of the earth that we see at this time that is really comparable to the glory that Yahweh promises his house. Now, you could think of any famous individual that you know, whether it's a political individual, whether it's in the arena of entertainment or sports or whatever. You know, someone who is well known, they really don't need an introduction. Their face is shown and everybody knows who that individual is. They don't even have to introduce themselves because they are that well known. Everybody knows who that individual is. Just think of, for instance, President Trump. I think you'll be hard-pressed to find somebody who don't know who the President of the United States is currently. But just think about each of you having that type of renown in the universe, where all of these beings who are witnessing what you're doing on a daily basis know who you are. Just think about going anywhere in the universe and beings coming up to you and they already know what your name is. They know what part of the work you were involved in, and they could tell you all about yourself because they've been seeing you on this sea of glass, like a television screen. So they've been seeing all your activities and your trials and your tests and so forth, and they have seen how you have come through all of this. So there's a level of glory that is attached to each of us in the house of Yahweh that we're not even aware of, except when we get into that field and you see it and then you'll understand it. But it's even so much more than that, because when you look up the word glory, it talks about abundance and magnificence and weight and etc. And it also talks about responsibility. Now, I just want to get through a couple scriptures here just to somewhat have us thinking about what Pastor is saying to us in Revelation chapter 12, verse 1, speaking of this house of Yahweh, because it's speaking of us now and the glory that Yahweh is giving us and how he is doing it. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 17 through 18, this reads, "For our light and momentary afflictions are achieving for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, so we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal." When we receive the authority that Yahweh has promised, and everything, all the trappings and whatever else that goes with the office, and we get it, and someone were to ask you, well, how bad was it? You'll be like, it was nothing. I know right now it doesn't feel like that. Okay, it doesn't feel like that at this moment, but, when you look back, it'll be like nothing. I was thinking about it. Could you really remember the tests and trials you were facing 5 years ago, what you were fretting about 5 years ago? Unless it was really something significant, what about 10 years ago? What about 15 years ago? What was the most important, pressing thing on your mind? You really have to kind of scratch your head and really think hard, like 15 years ago, what was I thinking about? Was I even in the house 15 years ago? What was the most pressing thing in my mind at that particular time? It's something like that. As you move forward in time and you look back at certain things, The most pressing, the biggest mountain that you have to deal with right now in 5 years' time, it's not going to look like anything much. Guaranteed. It's not going to seem that important. And it's a certain perspective that we need to have as we go by day. Certain things that might look like this is really the biggest thing that you have to deal with. It passes. And it becomes something else if you allow something else to take its place. But if you focus on what Yahweh is trying to show us here and to see yourself as being a part of it, then it really makes it all worthwhile. Speaking of what we're being shown here, let's look at another scripture. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, because I was thinking about this some months ago, about this glory, and trying to wrap my mind around what this glory is, and I really couldn't really get a decent handle on it, because, again, there's nothing on the face of the earth that it could really compare it to. It just doesn't exist. Even the most glorious thing on the face of the earth that you could think of right now will pale in comparison to what Yahweh has to offer. There's just simply, absolutely nothing on the face of the earth that will compare to the glory that Yahweh is going to give to his people. Now in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 9 through 10, it says, "But as it is written, eye has not seen." Eye has not seen, so again, there's nothing that's visible that you could compare it to. "Nor ear heard, neither have entered into the mind of man the things which Yahweh has prepared for those who love him." Now, just think about everything that you have seen in all the new moon films about the marvel of the creation and the earth and how interconnected it is, and the authority that Yahweh is planning to give us of the things which we cannot see, and in all the things that involves physics and different type of sciences and etc. And yet, everything that mankind has discovered with their instruments still pale in comparison to what Yahweh has in store. Because mankind could only see as far as their instruments could measure. But what about the things that they cannot measure? What about the things that they cannot even imagine? What about the things that they cannot even conceive or think about? And yet, all of those things are promised to us. So again, all of that is wrapped up in the glory that is being shown here in the scripture that Pastor is talking about. So it says, "Eye has not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the mind of man the things which Yahweh has prepared for those who love him. But Yahweh has revealed this to us through his Spirit, for the Spirit of Yahweh searches all things, yes, the deep things of Yahweh." The deep things of Yahweh. The only way we will know fully what Yahweh has in store for us is simply by making it. We have to make it. We got to be there. That's the only way. That's the only way we will find out. That's the only way we will know. Now we could just imagine, and we could just think about it. Just think about what Pastor said about Yeshua last week, that if he didn't have on clothing, he probably would have been invisible. Just think about this kingdom, Yahweh Shema, that could just be so near and you simply cannot see it. You just simply cannot see it. What if your eyes were open and you were able to see it? And the glory that surrounds the kingdom of Yahweh, the glory that surrounds this house of Yahweh that has been established in this last generation. So these are the things, brothers, that we have to be thinking about, the things that we should be contemplating. And Pastor is saying that it's only in this generation, this is verse 57 or verse 56, that this house is going to be fully established, fully in unity, fully perfect. Be you perfect as Yahweh is perfect. Yeshua said Yahweh's way is perfect. David said, his laws make my way perfect. You come to the house of Yahweh, Yeshua said, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and it will be worth it. Everything, every single thing that we have to endure, every affliction, every test, every trial, every hardship, every sorrow, every tear that we shed, absolutely everything is going to be worth it. And these are the things that we have to trust in and believe in and rest assured of and build our faith upon. It's absolutely going to be worth it. Now, I'm going to skip a bunch of this here, seeing that running out of time talking about this glory here. But let's look at verse 65. Here in Revelation 12, he shows you the glory of what is called a woman. Zechariah chapter 5, verses 4 and 6 shows the two witnesses called two women. When you put all this together, you get a beautiful, beautiful picture, and you see what we are going to be caught up to and the glory that we are going to receive. And this glory also, in part of the definition of the word glory, it's a weight. It also, it's heavy. That's really part of the Hebrew word. So this is a responsibility unlike any other that we could possibly imagine. Just imagine having the authority over planets, not just acres or countries, but actual planets. Imagine having authority over a solar system where you have more than one planet, all revolving around a sun, or imagine having authority over a galaxy where you have thousands of suns or hundreds of thousands of suns or even billions of them with who knows how many planets that surrounds each of them, and you have the responsibility to guard and keep whatever is going on in that portion of the galaxy. These are things that is just unimaginable. These are things that, you can lay at bed, you can lay down sleepless at night just thinking about this and what Yahweh is preparing us for. And it's so amazing that the things that we have to go through really, really pales in comparison to what Yahweh is promising. It really does. There's just no parallel. What we have to go through today to what we will receive in the very near future. There's really no comparison. And this is really the marvel of it that Pastor is trying to get across to us. In verse 66, he said, Satan had this glory and threw it away. Just completely just threw it away. Thought of it as nothing. They left their first estate, her and her sons. They left it. Yahweh won't beg them to come back. Their hearts are evil, like the gods they breed and create every day. They are doing it on earth. And just to wrap this up, let's see. Let's look at verse 70. Pastor says now, let's look at verse 69. The finishing of this woman is the kingdom of Yahweh. And remember Revelation 12:1, and the glory clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars upon her head, and it's describing this last day's work, the house of Yahweh, and the glory that Yahweh is going to give to this house. That's the kingdom of Yahweh that's going to resurrect the dead, including Yeshua's disciples. And even that, even just having the authority to do that, it's amazing. It's really something fantastic. He will give the order to his branch. Speaking of Yeshua, he's going to give his order to his branch. His branch will give the order to the donkeys. The donkeys will be given authority to resurrect the dead, to create and maintain flesh. Yes, that's the story. That's the story that we need to know. That's what we need to understand right now. That's the pattern that comes forth from Genesis in the beginning. And then he says, imagine the great mind that has brought this forth, talking about the gematria, the tag number, and so forth. He says, imagine this being planned and brought forth thousands of years ago. These numbers in the Hebrew that he gave to Abraham, the numbering system, and then he talks about the magnificence of this. And then he talks about make sure we get the book of Israel, that's verse 73, make sure we are studying them, make sure that we're reading them. But brothers, there's so much more that we could be thinking about instead of our sorrows and troubles and trials. And, we could spare a few minutes to think about the glory. Spare a few minutes just to think about the marvel of what Yahweh is doing and the promises that he has in store for each of us. And look ahead to that. Look ahead. See yourself achieving the promise that Yahweh has set before us in these last days, because it is for us. It's not for any other generation. It's not for any other people. Neither will it be given to any others. It's for us in these last days. So Yahweh bless your understanding.